Hi, I'm Rob Lemelson. I'm a visual and psychological anthropologist at UCLA, and I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but we're recording this video in place of my talk. I've been working on a variety of projects in Indonesia for the last 3 decades. We've produced, I don't know, 15 or 20 ethnographic films distributed by DER, including a six-part series on culture and mental illness entitled Afflictions, a film on the mass killings in Indonesia in 1965 entitled 40 Years of Silence, films on ritual and gender-based violence and the sex trade, and a whole range of topics from a perspective I've come to call visual psychological anthropology that melds the methods and approaches and orientations of psychological anthropology with ethnographic film. We've also done a number of multimodal projects. The first one, going back to 2015, was a ebook, a film study guide for the film Shadows and Illuminations, about a man struggling with a history of trauma and poisoning and violence in Indonesia, who arguably could be labeled psychotic but is locally labeled as spirit possessed. That was followed by a project, a multimodal project entitled Tajen Interactive. Tajen is the Balinese word for cockfight. I had taught Geertz's deep play notes in a Balinese cockfight for years, and the students found it rather opaque. And having worked in Bali for decades and having gone to a number of cockfights, we created an interactive site that included a half-hour sensory ethnography on the cockfight, and then divided the interactive component into 5 separate parts of the project, including how the blade is made from the point of view of the rooster, the fighting cock, the cockfighter himself, the cockfight, and finally the transformation of the loser chicken into food. And for each of those subsections, we included 2 to 3 films using a range of stylistic devices. I think it was an interesting project because it allowed students to approach the cockfight in a nonlinear way. That was followed by a project called Batuan Interactive. Batuan is the village where Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson did their field work in the mid-1930s. And Batuan Interactive is about the series of paintings that Mead and Bateson collected from the village of Batuan. They collected about 700 paintings. But what I particularly liked about it is we took imagery from the paintings themselves on cockfighting, on kite flying, on ritual, on rites of passage, and we showed how it was represented in the paintings. And then we transitioned to the same domain today through ethnographic footage that I've shot over the years. And both the Tajen Interactive and Batuan Interactive are on the web, so they're freely available for use in teaching or for students. So those are both available. And then I teach a range of classes at UCLA, and I realized that there was this disjuncture between what is typically taught, which is PDFs or books, written material, and then occasionally many professors will include a film, but that is not isomorphic or in parallel with all of our lives. We all use the internet in complex ways. So we engage with on a daily, minute-to-minute basis this whole visual array from social media and short clips on YouTube, etc. But that's not necessarily what we teach to our students or how we teach to our students. So in thinking about that, we created a web series called Anthrodorphins, and it's anthropology, and endorphins is basically anthrodorphins, making anthropology, learning anthropology pleasurable, following the endorphins example. And we've done a range of films on a range of topics, including globalization and decolonizing anthropology, forms of violence, pieces on race and ethnicity, pieces on childhood and socialization, the history of ethnographic film, which I think is quite relevant to this conference, rites of passage, basic ethnographic research methods. And the methodology for creating these films involves taking some of the material that we shot in Indonesia, but not exclusively that. So we drew from other YouTube films, from feature films, such as like The Godfather, for talking about violence. We used a popular culture reference like The Simpsons for talking about rites of passage, and we melded these in with a voiceover narrated approach by myself and my collaborator Annie Tucker, who's an anthropologist who's also worked for decades in Indonesia, and to create a friendly approach that's oriented towards, I think I've used them both in teaching introductory anthropology, but more particularly in upper division classes, and also for people teaching anthropology. And what I found to be really helpful is we divide these specific domain films in these areas I articulated, and then we have chapter headings within the films. I just taught an ethnographic film class, and I would cut out certain segments, and then I would drop it into PowerPoint presentations. And it would nicely break up the lecture and provide students in some ways, more familiar mode of learning or discovering about material within anthropology. So I found these personally helpful. They're now getting some significant views on YouTube. We envisioned the Anthrodorphins project to go beyond anthropology students and faculty use the materials as a more educational method for the general public, given that this is an important role for contemporary anthropologists. I think, as we all know, there's been a bit of an inward turn in the last several decades away from a public anthropology. And I think the AAA and other associations have made efforts to broaden our audience and to educate the general public about what anthropology has to offer. And so we were using the Anthrodorphins in that manner too. So we're deliberately making the language and visuals accessible to a wider audience, not just in the United States, but globally. We'd also like to use this opportunity as a shout out or a reach out to other anthropologists who'd be interested in collaborating with us at Anthrodorphins, and particularly if they have material that they would like to distribute that we could integrate and cut into our Anthrodorphins films. That would be like really great, a great result of this conference in particular. And I would encourage conference goers to explore not only our interactive websites, the Tacit Interactive and Batuan Interactive in particular, but to go to our Anthrodorphins and check it out and send us, please, any feedback on how we approach the topic, maybe theoretical orientations you don't agree with, additions that we could include, or suggestions for future Anthrodorphin film projects. Because this is an ongoing. We've produced, boy, I don't know. I mean, a lot at this point. A number of videos and we're coming up with other domains to explore. So if people at the conference have any suggestions or ideas for additions to the Anthrodorphins, or certainly any feedback, I'd be really interested in what people have to say. Yeah, so thanks very much, and I hope you all have a great conference.